Welcome back to another month, another episode of the Scattered Abroad Joint Podcast. This is actually kind of a unique opportunity because today the conference is ending. It's the first Sunday of the month, and we are finishing up the Gather Together conference. It's first ever conference for the Scattered Abroad Network. It's been held in Murray, Kentucky. We're all incredibly exhausted and tired from it because it's been over 200 sessions that will finish up today, and we will then begin working on the editing phase and getting those all uploaded to our app and YouTube and everything else. And so we hope that you will have benefited from that. If you've not been in person, we hope that you'll catch the episodes later and enjoy a study through the entire book of Psalms. I have with me today Wayne Rogers and Drew Suttles. These men are wonderful servants of the cross. We're grateful that they're here, and we're going to waste no more time. We're going to get right into the episode here about Matthias. Now, Matthias is probably not the most well-known of the 12, 13 now, I guess you could say. When Judas died, they had to select another, and Matthias is what we would call in this episode the replacement. And so the theme of this episode is there's some sovereignty that God employs in appointing servants, and that even when man fails, God's continuing to work, and it continues on. In 70 years, if we're all dead and gone off this earth, all of us watching and all of us experiencing this, the people who are alive and remain, the work of God will still be continuing. And that's a wonderful thought. It's bigger than any one of us. So as we begin with question number one, why was replacing Judas necessary to the apostleship?
I think if you start in Acts chapter 1, verse 20 through 26, and I just want to read that because it's also a quote from the book of Psalms. You know, there's, as it is written in the book of Psalms, let his dwelling place be desolate, let no one live in it, let another take his office. So this was prophesied, so this is prophecy coming to pass, this replacement. Therefore, of these men who have accompanied us all the time that the Lord Jesus went in and out among us, beginning from the baptism of John to that day when he was taken up from us to the ascension, one of these must become a witness with us of his resurrection. And so they called these, there was two men who fit that bill. Joseph called Barsabas, who was surnamed Justus, and Matthias. The lot fell upon Matthias, as you can continue to read through that. So there is prophecy that is involved in this to begin with. And I would say that the question was, why was it necessary? Prophecy certainly dictates that, but also there's a symbolic, I think, necessity in this being 12 who are going to go forward starting the church, if you will. And you think about the church being spiritual Israel in that way, and so you see that contrast from the Old Testament, I think.
Well, it is interesting. Matthias is the only one that is not specifically called to be an apostle by Christ speaking to him. Mm-hmm. Like, that doesn't happen in this. Yeah. With Paul, we're told Paul is told on the road to Damascus, go into the city, it'll be told what you must do. And then Paul specifically talks about in some of his writings to the Galatians and Ephesians and the others of Philippians and Colossians, he gives a better picture of, then I was ministered to as far as I was given the tools and the training the same as the apostles were given by Christ. And so Matthias is one of the lots fall and they cast on. We'll talk more about the process of that at the end of this episode, but Matthias is a one of one when it comes to the apostle selection process and everything else. And so he's definitely unique, but I look at the need to fill the gap and to have someone standing in the gap. You know, Judas did leave a hole in Acts 1, 15 through 20, that there was one needing to be fulfilled, because what also I think is important to point out from this, that the text really does seem to indicate and dictate. Think of the depression that the disciples of the other 12, the remaining 11, felt. Not only do you lose a brother because Judas has gone and done what he does, and this all happens within a 24-hour span, essentially, in their minds of, okay, Judas betrays Christ, Christ is crucified, he dies, and then after 3 days he's risen, sure. But in the process of all of that time, they lose their brother and their mentor, their rabbi. And now the rabbi has returned and he has ascended, but Judas has not returned. I don't think I've ever made that connection before until today, that they got to witness Jesus come back, but Judas does not. And there's this finality with Judas. And there had to be this feeling, as we've all experienced at some point or another, of someone that we love that was faithful, that was not faithful, and maybe they passed. Or maybe they were faithful, but for a time they've fallen away. And just that gut punch that we feel with everything. I have to think that part of the purpose of replacing Judas being necessary to the apostleship was to strengthen and encourage the apostles themselves. That yes, there will be 12 of us. God can do this. It wasn't, I mean, not to say that this happened. I have no scripture to back it up, but do we ever doubt sometimes when someone that we thought was so faithful and so solid, they've gone away? Man, how could that happen? What would be the case in the thought process when someone Jesus handpicked has gone and done what Judas did, but a moment of, man, does God know what he's doing? I know that sounds blasphemous to suggest, but if that thought maybe ever crossed our minds, we don't know if it did or not, but if it did, the choosing of Matthias helped stamp it out of, hey, people will make mistakes, they will stumble, they will sometimes sin to the point where they will lose their soul. Yeah. But the work of God is still going to continue on, and there will still be men who are worthy of being called to serve.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And the continuity of the mission, because the outline of the book of Acts is just a few verses earlier, Acts 1:8.
Yep.
Yeah.
You will be witnesses to me. You're going to go forth. You're going to preach the gospel. So leaving a vacancy unfilled could have hindered the work. And they could have said, well, is this still going on? By replacing him, say, hey, the work's going to keep going. But also the public credibility of the group together. Yeah. Hey, there's still 12 of us. Yes, we lost one, but we've gained one. The Lord's with us. We're going to go forward.
Yeah.
We already kind of talked about question number 2. I want to give you both a chance to add to that a little bit. For time's sake, we're doing an announcement a little bit, and we're running a little shorter on time with this. Mm-hmm. We'll come back to Matthias, I'm sure, one day as a highlights podcast, a special episode of Matthias. Sure. It's harder when you're at PTP and you've got to record all these in the time that we're doing. But
that's right.
We're looking at the qualifications required to be made an apostle. And the thing that I'll say, and then I'll throw it to you for a quick word or two about that, is it was God's criteria, not man. Mm-hmm. Man often picks the wrong people for the wrong or the right positions. And they select the man that they think will do the right job, but not the best. But there were some criteria given about being a witness to the resurrection, Acts 1:21 through 22. But what thoughts jump out to you about the qualifications that were required to be an apostle?
It was also companionship with Jesus. You had to be with him from the baptism of John to the day he was taken up. You mentioned Acts 1:21, but also it was Galatians chapter 1 and verse 1, Paul, an apostle not from men nor through man, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father. So it points to the divine nature of the work.
Yeah. And like you said, that companionship with Jesus, early in his ministry and on through that, from the time he was baptized all the way through. And I would say that this is likely, and this may hint at the next question a little bit, but I think he's one of the 120. The 120 disciples that are there, that are meeting. They seem to stick together. They're always together. They've been with Jesus, and so I think it's from that group that he's likely being chosen.
Yep.
So how do we see God's providence then in the selection of Matthias? Because here's the interesting thing. They cast lots. I mean, the funniest thing to me when I was a kid reading this was like, I used to think that was gambling. It's not. I remember thinking, though, wow, it's okay for them to do it, but we can't do it. But then I realized what it was actually doing was kind of like what happened with Jonah. We sometimes say draw sticks.
Yeah.
And the shortest stick is the one that's
straw.
it. That's it. Shortest straw. You draw straws, you sticks. Fight you. We draw straws. Shortest straw, that's the guy that's it.
Right.
Well, casting lots, you would think, means that God has no sway over that then. It's all up to chance, right? Is it? How do we see God's providence?
Well, before they casted lots, they prayed.
Yeah.
Verse 24, you, Lord, who know the hearts of all, show which of these two you have chosen.
Yeah.
So that points to not mere chance. It was recognized in the Old Testament as a method for discerning God's will. Proverbs 16:33 talks about it, Numbers 26. So the final decision was in God's providence. It wasn't, well, we'll just see what happens. That was man. But there's also unity and submission because they all accepted Matthias as the Lord's choice. There was no dispute on that, verse 26. And so the providence of God is at work because the integrity of the 12 is maintained here. You lost one, you've gained one. We're going to keep going through. And then the fulfillment of that prophecy is also a reminder, is consistent with his will.
Yeah, and I think when you go back and look at how the Lord chose them, and again, we talked about this in the very first episode, he brings all the disciples together. So there's a large group of disciples that have been following, much similar to this 120 probably, that he's called together, and out of that group, and so out of that group of disciples, then he names those 12 that he's chosen. Now his replacement is, you have these two who stand out among that 120, and yet here's the one the Lord has chosen. And so in that, so I think but there's maybe another point to this as well. There's a faithfulness to Matthias that stands out with the Lord, and so wasn't a big name like Peter, James, or John and so forth, but he walked with Jesus from the beginning. He stayed close throughout his ministry. The Lord knows him. He's chosen him from that group.
That's right.
Providence even in the process.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, God's will, even in casting lots. Not casting lot, casting lots.
Yeah.
I think the application for today is God raises up new leaders when others fall. And I think sometimes we fail to recognize that in the way that we should. We fail to see, we hear of the men who go astray. We hear of the men who, fall away, or they pass away in the sense of, now what? What's going to happen? Leaders fall in multiple ways. Sometimes they fall because their physical body no longer continues. I know we all miss the leadership of Curtis Cates on this side of the table. You would have loved having the opportunity to have known Curtis Cates to the degree that we were privileged to. Yeah. But only one of us at this table was taught by him, and that's you. I didn't have that experience of being taught at the school by him, but Brother Elkins and all of that, all of the people that we do love, Brother Walker, all the people that we love, those are leaders that fell, physically speaking, because their bodies gave up the ghost and they died. Yeah. And they no longer continue to serve on this earth. And so God can raise up new leaders to walk in those paths because we need them. We need men to be ready to do that. That's a whole reason why I wanted to do Scattered Disciples in part, was that was the crux of everything. The second way, though, that leaders fall is they often fall in such a way of falling away spiritually. Yeah. They fall away in a scriptural sense, whether that is a intentional abandonment of the scriptures and what they teach to teach error, or it is a abandonment of following the scriptures and living in sin. But even when that happens, as was the case in this case with Judas, of one that fell away for reasons that were unfortunate, God still finds a way, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And, the old Jurassic Park slogan was life finds a way. When in reality, none of that's true in the sense of the movie Jurassic Park, but it is true that God has always found a way. We sang about that every day for 2 years in school, didn't we?
Sure did.
Know the Lord will make a way. By the way, that was our lectureship theme this year. If you want to go back and catch that off the YouTube for lectureship at Memphis, that's what we studied. We love watching God work once we've kind of taken a step back and recognized that's what he did. Do y'all have anything else you want to add before we bring it to a close?
Yeah, I think just 4 things about Matthias, just real quick. There's faith, that faithfulness in the background matters. He was one who was in the background, so to speak, and so, but still faithful. The second thing is God sees what others don't. Yeah. We might have overlooked Matthias as part of that group, or something. The third thing is promotion comes through patience. He wasn't one of the first chosen to serve in that capacity. Time served faithfully, though, he's promoted later. And so I think there's a point in that to remind, especially maybe even young preachers coming up. And so there's a point in that. And I think the group of the 120 disciples reminds us that discipleship is also bigger than just the 12. And so we matter so many years and so many centuries later as disciples of Christ as well. So I think there's a point to be made. I think that's some things we learned in Matthias.
Absolutely. Drew?
No, that was well said. Very good.
That's all you got?
Yeah.
All right.
Wayne covered it.
I'm all right with it. I'm good with it, too. When Wayne said, I got 4 things, it's going to be quick, I thought it's going to be 7 minutes.
No, he nailed it.
But he did it in under a minute. We're thankful that you were here with us this week, this month, actually, talking about Matthias and studying more about the kind of the forgotten apostle in a lot of ways, the one that is the replacement, but he's also forgotten as no one's writing a ton of books on Matthias, unfortunately, though certainly a leadership book could include Matthias in their discussion. Yeah. Next month, we will be back with another episode. You can download all of our content on the Scattered Abroad Network app. If you have an iPhone or an Apple device, you could go and download that for free. You can also find all of our podcasts on all major platforms. You can watch us on YouTube with a lot of content that we have coming out. Text Takeaways is now also a video podcast that's been coming out this year, and it's in its second season now. And so we're studying the book of 1 John. We have 416 Ministries, coffee chats, and other things like that that are taking place that are tons of content, tons of good things going on for you to watch as well as listen to as we have Weathering the Storm and others. We hope and pray that you'll remember what Acts 8:4 says. Therefore, they that were scattered went everywhere preaching the word. Let's keep sowing and scattering the seed together.